Welcome to the Would You Like a Cup of Tea podcast in connection with the event Would You Like a Cup of Tea, which is all about dismantling prejudice and helping to form healing and human connections within our hearts and minds by creating a safe space for diverse voices to be heard. The project is dedicated to fostering empathy and social change through sharing lived experiences, creating a connection with authenticity amongst others, and more importantly within ourselves. You will hear a variety of live podcasts that have taken place on the night, as well as from others who have come to share their stories at a later date, whilst also sharing their thoughts around the event. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for listening.
I'm going to have to figure out Emma's table. Table so this is
Hello and good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to join us this evening. I did write myself a little speech, but I can't see it. I just wanted to say thank you for coming and just to emphasise on the fact that this is really important. This is more than just a social gathering. It's not about just coming to chill and have a chat. People are being really vulnerable and sharing really important parts of their lives. Some of the feedback we have had so far is that, people swap tables and things like that. I mean, if you feel like that's appropriate for your group, then that is absolutely fine. However, we prefer it if you didn't, because the point in the process is to form healing bonds and connections, and you can't do that in 5 minutes. So, the other thing is, has everyone got their tea? So your teapots are filled with water so that everybody can drink a tea of their choice at the table rather than give you all pots of tea that not everyone might want to drink. And lastly, last week nobody wanted to leave, which was great. And I have been told this evening that once we're finished up, we are welcome to stay a little bit longer, but by that time you'll have to collect drinks at the bar, I'm afraid. Sorry. Right, so our main speaker this evening is an author. Her name is Bharti. Would you like to come say something, Bharti? Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ash, for inviting me. Thank you for coming. Right, we are going to take our seats and start with our podcast. Yep, bring your tea. That's it there. Yep, okay.
Okay, guys. What do I do? Just talk in here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So I know I've already introduced you, but for the sake of the podcast, because these go up on YouTube as well after, on my YouTube channel, which is called My Voice and Power. So can you tell us your name and a bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Bharti Dhir, and I am the author of this book called Worth. It's available on Amazon and in Waterstones and Risk and other places. I feel very honoured to be here, and I'm very appreciative of all of you coming. Just a little bit about myself. I'm of dual heritage, African Asian, and my story is about being abandoned on the roadside in Uganda. Initially, everybody thought I was an Asian baby, but when they found out I was of dual heritage. I was adopted by an Asian family, a Sikh family, and my story is called Worth because essentially it's all about experiences in life that we go through as children, the messages we hear, and how they impact on our sense of worth. And I heard lots of messages about my heritage during my childhood.
So, how did you come to find out about being abandoned? Really, because you said from birth. So,
Yeah. So I was 8 years old, and I went into my dad's study, which was forbidden to all of us. And I used to be an avid reader. I loved reading, and I went into my dad's study and I saw a file with my name written on it. And when I opened the file, I saw the word adoption, and I didn't know what adoption meant, but I knew enough to go and look in the dictionary. And then and that's how I found out. I saw newspaper clippings of they said an abandoned Asian child. And so, yeah, that's how I found out.
and how did you feel when you found that out?
I think I was just more shocked that I wasn't told about being adopted. I mean, many years later, when I was about 16, I was able to talk to my mum for the first time about being adopted. Although you must bear in mind that throughout this time, I knew I was adopted, but I had to keep it a secret. So at 16, I did ask my mum. I said, look, I know I'm adopted and I need to know the story. How did I know how you found me. I know how you adopted me, but I want to know why you kept it a secret. And she said, well, it's because we never wanted you to feel different. We didn't want you to ever think you were not part of this family. And I think that was very common in the 60s, that people didn't tell their adopted children that they were adopted. And I think that's why I wasn't told. I could understand the reasoning, but what I couldn't match up to was hearing the messages in the community about me, and and trying to make sense of those messages. I think that was the crucial part for me.
And how did you come to make sense of them?
Well, I think it was with the growing realization of the prejudices that exist in communities. So, there were messages about me being illegitimate. There were prejudicial messages about illegitimacy. People saying things to my father and mother like, oh, she's going to dishonor you by having a child out of birth as well. Then there were messages around sexism, like, if you want to adopt, why don't you adopt a male? Why are you adopting a female? She's going to be a burden on you, and things like that. So I think the messages were essentially a big part of me growing up.
Yeah, so that must have spoke a lot to you in so many different ways. So how did you and your parents go about navigating that?
I think my parents didn't realize that little children have ears and can listen. So I think they just sort of didn't realize that. I think it was after I found out I was adopted that the messages began to make sense to me. Mm-hmm. But you must remember, I couldn't talk to my parents about it, because I couldn't say, well, they're referring to me here, aren't they? Mm-hmm. They're saying she's going to bring dishonor. They would say, like, point to me and say, she's going to bring dishonor in your family, or how are our children going to get married? Because they said to my father, everybody's going to think you had an affair with an African woman. So how are we going to get our kids married off? Because nobody's going to want our kids. So they would just be pointing at me saying it, and my parents would answer them back like something like, well, we'll just see. God will decide what's going to happen or not. But nobody realized that I actually understood. So when I was before the age of 8, if I heard messages, they didn't make sense to me, and I still naively didn't believe they were referring to me. After the age of 8, those messages became much more clear to me.
And 8 is a very impressionable age, so we naturally become more inquisitive around that kind of time of life as well. Anyway, is this, do you think, down to the culture of the country that you were in that it was like that?
I think I'm not sure if it's about culture, but I think I was born in Uganda, and I think I got it from both sides. I got it from the Africans, who looked down upon me for being part Asian. And then I got it from the Asians who looked down upon me for being part African. So it was like a twofold thing. Yeah.
So how have you been able to find where you fit?
I think it took a long time. And in my book, I've said that I spent so many years comparing myself to Western and Eastern ideas of beauty and finding myself wanting. And in that part, for many, many years, I lost my identity in that way because I never considered myself to be beautiful. I never considered that curly hair could be beautiful, dark skin could be beautiful. And I think it was literally in my 20s when I actually started to appreciate who I was. And it was in my 30s when I identified myself as a strong Black woman who deserves to be here and who has a purpose.
What was it about your 20s that helped you come to that point where you got to?
Well, I think I was at university and I'd reached a very low point in my life and just wishing I hadn't been born, literally, thinking, what's the point?
Yeah.
I personally believe that my guardian angel came to me one night. I was lying on my university bed and my guardian angel said to me, it could have been a dream, but said to me, well, you've got a choice. You can either shut yourself away from the world or you can go out there, look the world in the eye because you have come here for a purpose. We all have a purpose. Every single one of us here has a purpose in life. And the message just said, you know, you've got a purpose. Either you shut yourself away or you go out and face the world with your head held high. Stop looking at your scars. Stop thinking you're not worthy to speak. Stop thinking you're not worthy to look at people in their faces and start talking and start believing in yourself. And that was the epiphany moment for me.
Okay, yeah, and it would have been so easy to shut yourself away. Where do you think you found the positivity from to get past
Do you
that?
know, it wasn't an overnight thing. I mean, literally the next day, you have to start believing. So I started, you know, trying to force myself not to let negative thoughts impede my thinking. Because that negativity would be from the start of the day right through to bed and maybe sleeping throughout the night with negativity in my mind. So I had to start forcing myself to think positive thoughts. Whether I believed them or not, I had to.
Yeah.
And then I slowly started saying affirmations to myself. And that's how I started to change.
And you mentioned scars. Are you talking physical scars or mental and emotional scars?
I think mental as well as physical scars, because at age 8, I got a skin disease and it's called epidermolysis bullosa. So for those of you who don't know, it's called EB for short. And I think I've been diagnosed with this EB simplex. So luckily, although I never thought I was lucky at the time, it's not as serious as some of the other forms of EB. And that causes your skin to blister from your head to your toes. So it's almost like somebody's taken a kettle of boiling water and poured it over you. So that's what I was suffering from. And I was shunned a lot at school. People shunned me because they thought I was contagious when EB is not contagious. So I lost my nails through it. And obviously there's a lot of scarring on my body from the blisters that were there, and they popped and left scars behind. But I think I was still one of the luckier ones.
Okay.
So that's what I'm talking about, the physical scars. But the mental scars, obviously there's always a trauma. You know, the trauma was of understanding the prejudicial messages. But also I think the emotional scars were related also to what my family and I experienced when we had to leave Uganda in 1972, when Idi Amin threw all the Asians out. And, you know, what we saw on the way out, which is typical of what many asylum seekers and refugees experience. We don't necessarily understand their trauma. And so when I see some things on the news, it reminds me of our trauma and what we went through and what we saw and what we experienced when we were leaving Uganda.
Yeah, and this is exactly what this evening is about. So thank you so much for coming to share. What do you think has been the hardest thing for you to deal with?
That's an interesting question, actually. I think the hardest thing for me to deal with is that my book Worth is about highlighting the prejudices in society. And I think the hardest thing is actually seeing that there's still prejudice of all sorts. I mean, you hear about it in the news, women getting killed because they've got babies, they're going to bring illegitimate children, or women getting killed because they're women, they're female children. All these sort of prejudicial notions that people have in the world. And I'm not saying that my book is going to save the world, it's not. But it's just hard to deal with. Even in our communities, there's still prejudice towards each other. There is colorism in our communities, in our Black communities. There's still that issue of colorism. In the Asian community, there's still an issue of colorism. The fairer you are, the more beautiful you are. The darker you are, you're not considered to be so beautiful. You still hear messages, negative messages. So I think that is the hardest thing to deal with.
Okay. Did you find the writing of your book quite healing? 'Cause I know I did when I wrote mine.
Actually, I did, but I have to say it took a long time.
Yeah.
You write bits and then you walk away.
Yeah.
And then you write bits and you walk away. You write bits and you walk away. And I was I must share you my story of how this book came to being, in case there are any budding writers out here. So there is a publishing house called Hay House, UK. And I've got my niece here, Aisha. She insisted I submitted a chapter to Hay House. And I really prevaricated, didn't I? I would not submit that chapter because every year they have a competition for Black and ethnic minority writers. And so Aisha insisted. So that final day, 1 minute to midnight before the deadline, I submitted a chapter. And although I didn't win, they still wanted to publish my book. That's how it came about.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you confidently would say that you have found your worth now. Is that how you come to name the book what it's called?
Well, I called it Worth because I wanted to really highlight that there are experiences in the world that bring down our sense of worth, and actions and words by others that can hurt people to the extent that that person can feel worthless. And I just wanted to highlight that there are experiences also that bring up a sense of worth. So it's a mixture, and there's a chapter in my book which I think personally is a very powerful chapter about a mother's courage. And it's all about my mum having soldiers point a gun at her and ordering her to leave me behind because they said that I was not an Asian, I was one of them. And my mum refused to leave me behind. And I think it's things like that. So there are times when your worth is brought right down, and then there are times when your worth goes right up. And I was very fortunate to have the mother that I had. And so I wanted, so in terms of finding my worth, yes, I have found my worth. I'm very confident to say that. And I don't let negativity affect me. My mom used to always have a saying, there was a time when we came from Uganda to England, we were in the refugee camp. And then we were put in a council house in Whitley. Anybody local knows Whitley has a bit of a reputation. In the 70s, there was a lot of racism, and we used to have bricks and all sorts chucked through our windows. and people telling us to get out. And my mum used to say, if anybody, these people have got weak minds. That's literally the translation from Punjabi. And that's how I see it now. If anybody is negative towards you, or mean towards you, or horrible towards you, it's because they have got weak minds. And that's how I interpret it, literally. I know it's not my problem, it's theirs. And I'm not going to wear your mantle of your whatever trauma you have gone through on me. I'm not having that.
Yeah, good for you. What other positive life outcomes have you had then since healing?
Well, I've had the book. I've got my lovely daughter there. So that those are the most positive, and I've got my family, my friends. Yeah, those are the most positive life events. I think family and friendship is everything, and we should appreciate what we have around us. That the people that support us, and the people that love us for who we are, and the people who look out for us and watch our backs at all times unconditionally. I think that's the positive.
And have you found life easier since you found your worth?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's easier, but I would say it is far better. You still get some self-doubts creep in sometimes, but you just got to remember not to let those self-doubts completely take over your being. So I try and squash them as soon as they're
Yeah, and how do you go about doing that?
I say positive affirmation. I just say a prayer, or I say an affirmation that says, no, you're not going to do this. I am worth more.
And do you think your experience has impacted your parenting?
My daughter's nodding her head.
Would you like to come and join us? In a positive way? Yeah. You sure you don't want to join us? Okay. Oh.
Well, she says it's positive.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's good, isn't it?
It is good. It's great.
And she's smiling.
Yeah.
And I haven't paid her to say that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have you got anything else that you'd like to share with us?
I think the key message that I want to give to everybody here today is that we're all worthy. We've all got a life purpose. Just believe in yourself. Don't hold back. Don't hold back on your dreams, and just go and do it.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Then can we ask a question?
Okay, let's open up the floor. Does anybody have a question that they would like to ask?
He's got his paper ready.
Wait, I'm coming.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Anthony, and I think today you have someone new that's going to buy a copy, one of your books.
Okay.
Because as an African, I strongly believe that we who came from Africa, we need to try our best for the African history to be right in the right way. You said something about African looking down on you as a child, And in my interpretation of that, once in the African society, we love stranger. We might hate ourselves, but we always love stranger. But you being half Asian, you were born within the African setting, and at that time, I read African history. I know what was going on in Uganda at that time. There might be a reason. So the experience that you might have had from other culture can easily blend in. But when they come, think about that. When they were trying to kick your family out, the African pointed a gun at your parent and they say, "Give us back our child," because they believe it belongs to the society. I don't think it was something. I'm going to read the book. If I read the book, I'm going to actually be one of the critics for me to see what I can do with that. So I think, from as an African perspective, like somebody who's born in that society, African culture loves stranger more than we love in ourselves.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have a question?
Yes. Hi, thank you so much for sharing. I just wondered, have you ever been back to Uganda? And if you have, what was that like? Returning to a place of your identity but of trauma as well?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I did go back to Uganda. I went back, I think, in early 2000s. I think it might have been 2003 or 2004. It was really to settle my mum's affairs because she'd passed, and we still had the garage that my dad had built in his name, in Kabale in Uganda. So essentially, I went back to sell it off. And when I went, it just felt really surreal. It felt like I was stepping back home. But when we were going through the roads and we were traveling down to Kabale, you saw burnt out shells of tanks, and that was Idi Amin's regime then. You saw so many shells, and that brought back the memory of what we saw when we were leaving. So in a way, it felt like I was home, but not really home. Does that make sense? And when we got into Kabale, I saw my childhood home, and it was just like a ghost house. There were no windows left. It was in ruins, basically. I couldn't even remember the garden. We used to have a lovely green garden. That was all gone. It was like a big dirt mud track. And also everything was just, when I walked through into the veranda, even the veranda was all broken up. There were no lights. So yeah, it didn't feel like home. And it felt like closure then, because I saw that there was nothing to come back to. And I was able to sell my mum and dad's garage, and I was able to sell the property without any qualms. So I think I needed that journey to have that closure. But we had some interesting times even when I was in Kampala. Now you've got to remember, this was in the early 2000s, and going to a restaurant, and there were all these armed guards around the restaurant because they were still getting bandits coming in. I don't think it's like that now, because my family just recently went to Uganda. It's really beautiful, and it is still Uganda is the most beautiful country to visit and to go to. I would encourage everybody to go to Uganda. It's changed a lot from the 70s and the early 2000s. There isn't any, in fact, the Ugandan children, I was told, don't even know the history of Idi Amin. It's all been put away. Nobody knows. They don't know the history. They were quite surprised to hear the history from my family. When my family went into the schools, they don't teach it.
That's sad. So also interesting. Does anybody else have a question?
First of all, many thanks for your wonderful talk. Wow, it's incredibly deep and incredibly moving. So I've got two questions really. One, what languages do you speak apart from English? Do you speak Punjabi?
I speak Punjabi.
Do you speak Swahili also?
I used to speak Swahili. It's all gone now. From the age of 12, there was nobody Swahili speaking around us. I used to speak Gujarati as well, and I used to speak Hindi, but now most of those languages are gone. Only Punjabi and English.
And then the final question is to food. What's So, in terms of food, do you still connect to the food of your family and also your African ancestry?
Yeah, in Uganda we were blessed with both African food and Asian food in our home. So I love matoke, which is like a green banana. I love cassava. Yeah, so we used to make both Asian and African food, and yeah, so I like both foods. Yeah.
Actually, you brought me another question. Sorry. Because my journey is from Jamaica to here, one of the challenges is sharing food with my children. It's not much a challenge. Is do children eat your food, or you have to make allowances? I'm not trying to put you on the spot, by the way.
Yeah, my daughter was brought up eating all the foods that we eat.
Okay.
Yeah, so she's good. She eats whatever is put in front of her.
Thank you so much.
She was never given a choice.
And he really is stealing my job because I was going to ask the same question. Eat what you're given or go without. Any other questions? Right. Oh, this is right. This is the last one. Sorry, thank you.
I just wondered what types of like affirmations work for you, what types of for that positivity.
Can I read out a couple from the book? Is that all right, Nyesha? Okay. I think I've got the. So I'll just read out some affirmations. When I allow my self-worth to rise, negative thoughts and feelings evaporate. I believe in the power of my worth. I believe I'm worth it every moment, every second, all day and night. That's the one I used to say at university. I didn't believe it initially, but I started to believe it. When I show compassion to others, both my worth and my confidence grow. Today is the day I say enough to a lack of self-belief, so the roots of my worth can take hold and finally grow. And I'll just read one more. Let me see which one I really like. No person has the right to take my spirit just because they don't like something about me, my beliefs, values, or lifestyle. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Would You Like a Cup of Tea podcast, brought to you by My Voice in Power, Black on the Table, Bread and Biscuit Factory, and Unity Live Radio.